I'm Emma, and today I want to talk about Lauren Greenfield and Pierre Bourdieu. Okay, so let's get started. So, first, I have a question. So, um, when asked about your style, or one is asked about one style, some people say, hey, I like what I like, and just don't think deeper than that. Just, it is what it is. But have you ever wondered about how your taste developed and why you like what you like, why you would kind of seemingly random prefer, one aesthetic over another, or one item over another? Like, is it random? Well, I'm asking so rhetorically. I'm kind of saying it isn't. Yeah, so this is what I want to talk about today. Um, so I have a picture, from Lauren Greenfield's Generation Wealth book, and I could have picked a lot of pictures, and in fact, in some ways it would have made sense to pick a picture that was more about the depicting like the middle class emulating wealthy people. But I picked this picture here, so you can see this woman is in Santa Monica, California, at a mall. You can see the McDonald's in the background. She is unhoused, 67 years old, and she has next to her a fake Louis Vuitton purse. So anyway, technically it's called Arline, 67, who is homeless with an imitation Louis Vuitton bag at Mall Food Court, Santa Monica, California, 2005. Okay. Kind of a long title, but I like how descriptive it is. It's not like untitled. Like, okay, not that there's anything wrong with untitled. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, okay, so yeah, so I want to talk about Greenfield's Arline, 67 and French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu's ideas about aesthetic, socio-economic, class, and distinction. This is well, this isn't the original. The original is La Distinction, and this isn't the original translated book, Distinction, but this is the copy that I have. You can see I really like this book. It took me a long time to read because I was just so yeah, just like underlining everything. Yeah, if you can't tell already, kind of dorky, but anyway, I find it just absolutely fascinating, and I think most people would too if they read it. So yeah, so hence talking about it. Okay, moving on. So anyway, so this image, page 92 of the Generation Wealth book, you can see this woman who is unhoused, and we know this from the description, but it also isn't surprising information. And yeah, and also, no shade on this woman. We could all be in this situation, and yeah, this isn't saying any making any judgments about anything. I would say thank you to her for being in this photo that we're depicting. So anyway, we're not judging her. I think this photograph is just a vehicle where we can see a lot of ourselves in it and have a discussion about society. So that's kind of how I want to approach this. So but so she's unhoused, but she has this Louis Vuitton bag, and these bags cost USD 1,500 to 4,500 on average, and some Louis Vuitton bags are even over $8,000. Yeah, I was kind of looking on line so that I could mention the price range here, and I saw a used one for 28,000 actually on Walmart. So I don't know if that's, I think that's outside of kind of the typical range, but just saying it can be pricey. I'd also like to point out, we're saying 1,000 to 5,000, upwards of 8,000 kind of cost. And so I just wanted to juxtapose that to the median American income is 30,000. So like the mean is 60,000. So a lot of times we hear that figure, but if you think about it, Elon Musk just became a trillionaire. So that is, skewing the average to, to kind of inflate the middle number. So, so if you go by the median rather than the mean, that's 30,000. So if you didn't eat anything or wear anything and you didn't live anywhere, maybe you lived in a public space, just wore the clothes that you had, and I don't know, like went dumpster diving for food, I guess, you could buy 3 of these Louis Vuitton bags in a year and you could have 6,000 left over. So I did the math. So anyway, this is definitely a deal compared to like a Birkin bag where you'd have to do this for 3 years to have one bag, probably more because you would need to like buy in advance to be able to purchase, but I didn't even, we'll just stop. So anyway, these are very expensive bags, especially compared to, the income of people, whether it's someone who's unhoused or it's someone with the median American income. There's something going on there. So I think that most people would agree that no one who has an income that would put them in a situation where they don't have a shelter would buy a luxury bag. Like it just doesn't make sense. But we know, both from a closer look at the bag and from the description that the Louis Vuitton bag is fake. But why would an unhoused woman carry a bag that looks at first glance like it's really expensive? And also we could, replace that last sentence with like a middle class person, which would be a less extreme situation, but I would say a more common one. I kind of feel like looking at this case, since it's like even more extreme, just kind of makes it more, then you can kind of take a step back and then look at the middle class who more often are imitating the wealthy than the underclass or the lower class. So it's kind of, it's kind of like, instead of doing like a really complicated math problem first, why not do an easier one so you can kind of see what's happening, understand like the order of operations, I guess. Well, what I would say is kind of a thesis is that so Bourdieu found in his research in France in the 1960s, which you can read about in Distinction or the Distinction if you're French and want to read it in your native language, or if you know French and want to read it in French to bypass the translation. So he wrote about la distinction or distinction, that everyone has a habitus that reflects their socio-economic status in taste and aesthetics, are weaponized by elite to maintain power in hierarchical society. So I'm going to read that again. Everyone has a habitus that reflects their socio-economic status and taste, and aesthetics are weaponized by the elite to maintain power in a hierarchical society. Okay, maybe a run-on sentence, but I digress. So let's break this down. So Bourdieu came up with the idea of the habitus, which he, writes about in Distinction. And he explains that your family, friends, people you know from institutions such as school, when you're in a young age, influence your taste in everything. Then later in life, you don't exactly know why you like what you like, but you're influenced by your experiences that came before. So these are like really influential years, and you can be influenced later, but it's a little trickier. It's kind of the earlier years that are more formative. A very simple example of this, and Bourdieu gives so many examples, and you could even just imagine examples beyond 1960s France. Some people, like critics of the book, they like really kind of homed in on this like 1960s France, but 1960s France isn't the point. This is applicable across geographies, across time, so across space and time. So don't get too hung up in the details, but details are good for examples. So let's say your parents always played classical music when you were growing up. Then when you're older, maybe a new avant-garde composer comes out with some music that heavily draws on classical music, and you'd be more apt to like this avant-garde classical modern music than appreciating country music if you hadn't been exposed to country music growing up. So the classical music versus country music. Classical music is associated with the upper class, and country music is associated with the lower class. However, one aesthetic isn't better than the other. These musicians had to train. They have their different styles. I mean, you could argue that classical music would take more training, but you'll also see in other examples that it becomes negligible or not even a thing. For example, figure skating seems more elite than hockey, but hockey has expensive equipment, has expensive training. So even though we're like putting one thing over the other, it's not really that case. Another example I could give is I like to dance, so I took a class in tap dancing and learned like Irish folk tap dancing at a studio I also took ballet at, and I also took a hip hop class there. So if you're thinking about this like hierarchy of wealth and class, you might think of ballet over hip hop, but both classes cost the same amount of money, and both art forms took a lot of thought and development and culture to create. So there isn't one that's better than the other. It's you could say just a matter of taste. So it's really arbitrary. Like arbitrary is kind of key to understanding this. Like it could be otherwise. So Yeah, so anyway, I've kind of gotten away from like the classical music, country music, but yeah, I think you see the point that it's just what you're growing up with, and it's associated with a class, but it could be anything. But it's just the fact that it was associated with the class, not anything inherent to the art form. And in a parallel universe, it could all be otherwise. Hockey could be seen as more elite. Country music could be seen as more elite. So nothing about the actual aesthetics, whether it be an activity or an object, it's pretty arbitrary except for its association with power. So yeah, Bourdieu says they're pretty arbitrary, and yeah, there could be an alternative universe, where symphonies are seen as lowbrow and all this kind of thing. So the purpose of the habitus, this concept by Bourdieu, is to replicate class for the next generation. So, for example, if you teach your kids tennis and polo and golf and kind of things associated with the upper class, then they'll probably develop an affinity for it. I mean, maybe they'll hate it, but we tend to like things that we're exposed to more. And yeah, I mean, you can't like something until you're exposed to it, right? So, maybe one of these, maybe you hate two of these things, but then one sticks. And so then, you're playing golf or polo or whatever you like. Then you're gonna hang out and associate with other people who came from families who also were brought up liking these things. So it's not, it's there aren't signs like, at the tennis court or the golf course or the, I don't know where people would go to play polo, but there are kind of these invisible structures at play that are reinforcing these hierarchical structures, because even though everyone's invited, there's still some gatekeeping because you had to be, you have to be interested in it. You have to be raised in a family where you would just kind of casually be like, oh, this is what we do, unless you're like seeking it out. Also, like I said, sometimes the cost is the same, like, taking hip hop or ballet at a dance studio or taking hockey or figure skating lessons, this costs the same. But sometimes it does cost more to do the more affluent activity, and it's no accident. This is kind of a way to keep out the riffraff, to keep cohesion in these hierarchies, especially in America, because hierarchies were more fluid. Today, it's much more difficult to change socioeconomic class. Like, it's easier in Europe, even though America has the mythology of picking yourself up by the bootstraps and, being an orphan in a new land, and, as an individual, going out west and striking it rich. But yeah, so these networks will be maintained. This is why we had the advent of museums. So yeah, it's kind of weird because, like, I absolutely love art museums. It's like anytime I go to like a new city, it's like I want to know, what art museum I can see, or I might know the art museum and be like, oh, I get to finally go to it. But at the same time, these places with this beautiful culture, were also originally formed in the US, and one as a way to replicate Europe, and but also distinguish itself from Europe, to kind of say we have our own art and culture here. But it's also creating these third spaces, which usually I think of as good, but third spaces that would keep similar hierarchies of people together so that they can network with each other and keep other people out. So today we still say it's all about who and yeah, I mean, we like to think of ourselves as a meritocracy, but there are all these things at play that undermine this kind of dream or fantasy or goal, however you want to think about that. So the middle class, can only go so far in emulating, or as in Lauren Greenfield's picture of this unhoused woman in Santa Monica. You can only go so far in this emulation. So you can emulate the rich with a different habitus a little bit, but one thing about our society too is that if you try to socially climb too high, you get made fun of. It's people want to put you in your place. Who do they think they are? And like, oh, they're getting too big for their britches. I mean, these are cliches. I don't have like software, but like if I did, it would probably underline it and be like, this is a cliche, get rid of it, right? People are shaming people who want to change on the social hierarchy. Now, if they're doing things a little bit more, this is very complimented by society. Like if you're, wearing something kind of nice but not too show-offy, it's like, okay, they're, I mean, it's like America loves like a good makeover television show with people who are maybe down on their luck, and then trying to bring them into this middle class space by dressing a certain way or decorating their home in a certain way that reads middle class, but not too much. You don't want to be too much. Okay, so yes, so let's apply what we've learned from Bourdieu to Greenfield's image. So while Greenfield's photograph is an image of a woman from the lower class, like I said, it's actually the middle class that does most of the emulation of the rich. It's just, I think, and we can, in the future, like look at images like this, and I would definitely like to, but I think that sometimes it can be easier to look at things that are more extreme. Also things that are a little older, if things are dated, it's like easier for us to, see how crazy something looks, because we're not kind of seduced by the aesthetics of the here and now. Because right now, whatever aesthetic it is, I know for myself, and I think this is true for most people, I will say, it can be difficult to kind of, see the history while it's happening. Everything seems like, oh yes, this is the way it is. And it's only until we get a distance that it's easier to see clearly, what was kind of going on. So yes, so with this middle class emulation, I want to give another example, and it's actually an example from Bourdieu. So he gives the example, in La Distinction, or Distinction, yeah, I'm not holding up la distinction, it's distinction, but he gives the example of like a rich person would have a painting on their wall, whereas a middle class person maybe couldn't afford a painting, but they still want to emulate the rich. So instead of having a painting, they have a framed poster of a painting, that they purchased like at a museum. We're talking about these institutions with their hierarchies. So in this way, and I don't know, I mean, I love a good poster painting. I have a couple. I have one of Rauschenberg and Modigliani that I got in Paris, and yeah, I don't know. That's what I could afford. Not really able to afford the originals. But actually there was like a Rauschenberg collage I saw for like 4,000 euros, and I wanted to buy it, but people were like, Emma, save your money. Like, this is, I mean, I don't know, that would be, and this is like 2002, so this is like 2002 euros, this is like, expensive. Yeah, even now, it's just, very expensive. So anyway, I can't remember how much like the poster was, but yeah, a lot cheaper. So anyway, this is what the middle class does. But obviously, wouldn't it be great to have the original Rauschenberg or Modigliani? I mean, I would, love that. But I buy what I can afford, right? But in a way, this is, like in economics, they would call it an inferior good. Like if there's a recession, going back to economics 101, if you, can't afford something, there are goods that, are called inferior goods that, economists say, you only buy it if you can't afford the thing that you actually want, but the supply and demand curve, do you like my little supply and demand curve, doesn't allow for that. So in a way, the middle class is buying an inferior good, even though, I love my little posters, but yeah, and I mean, they are more portable, but yeah, anyway, that gets into another thing, because then you don't have to pay to move them. And but yeah, I mean, if you were, like in the 1%, this would not be a problem. You would just, have someone else move them. You wouldn't care about the cost, or I guess you would, but yeah, it would not be an issue moving your art collection. So yeah, so where was I in this? Yes. So I was just saying that, painting is what the rich would have, then a replica or an imitation good of the painting, that places the middle class in an aesthetic position where they are replicating the aesthetics of the rich, but it's inferior. So in a way, the middle class is kowtowing to the rich by kind of uplifting their aesthetics in a hierarchy, saying, you are what we aspire to, and this is our inferior good that kind of aspires to you, but is not there. But there could be an alternative situation, and I'm going in this in maybe a different direction. I'm not saying that these would be reversed like a parallel universe. I'm saying in this world that we live in, there could actually be, for example, someone from a lower class who creates like a carving, like a folk carving, and they have like an original sculpture that they put on display on their mantle. And that's kind of interesting to think about, because that would not be an inferior good, because that is not making reference to the wealthy and being inferior to it. It is just adjacent to it. It is a different aesthetic that is not asking itself to be judged in comparison of the aesthetics that the upper class are setting. It's just its own thing. So I think that's really interesting. And also, like, side note, I just really like that. I just really like it when people are not kind of trying to emulate, but just saying, hey, I'm gonna do my own thing. And I just think that's really powerful, because it's stepping outside of this hierarchy and just kind of saying, like, I don't know, I mean, it's kind of a fuck you, it's just saying, like, I'm gonna do my own thing, and I think I'm awesome. And yeah, I don't know, I just think that's really powerful, and I kind of love that. So yeah. So then I gave the example that I don't know, I came up with this idea of like a carving. So it's not positioning itself as something inferior, it just is. But sometimes the lower class does emulate the middle class, like as in Greenfield's photo. It becomes each class trying to emulate the class above it, and move up the hierarchy. So these Louis Vuitton bags made out of canvas and plastic with flashy logos is very middle class. So it's a Veblen good that shows off conspicuous consumption. So this is a very middle class thing. So class and earning power and inherited wealth has become almost a religion in the Western world, and especially the United States. So choosing to emulate the rich, or what we imagine the rich would be in a mythology of richness, is kowtowing to soft power and a cultural hegemony that worships neoliberalism and materialism. So I guess this is like a thesis statement too. So most of us are guilty of buying into this to some extent. I don't know if the pun is intended or not when I wrote this, but yeah. So the aesthetics of items are neutral, but they give meaning to society, and the aesthetics reflect an aspirational lifestyle of the underclass, mimicking the habitus of the rich. So instead of having your habitus and just picking out what you like, you're trying to think, if what would the habitus of a rich person be, rather than what do I like. You're kind of trying to pretend to be someone else in a way, and kind of imitate the taste of someone else. So it's actually kind of disturbing to think about, instead of just getting what you like, or maybe you think you're getting what you like, but you're actually trying to emulate a hierarchy, and you don't even realize it. So that's why I think it's important to think about. It's like, well, why exactly do you like this, or think you like this, or maybe you like it but for the wrong reason, or I don't want to say the wrong reason, but maybe a reason that would ingrain structural hierarchies, and you can decide if that is good or bad. I mean, I would say it's bad, but yeah. Okay. Yet, because it's obvious that it's a fake Louis Vuitton bag in the picture, it looks slightly ridiculous in a way. I mean, it shows us how ridiculous a lot of things are that at first don't seem ridiculous, but actually are equally ridiculous. So a Louis Vuitton bag juxtaposed with, unwashed fingernails, a cigarette, a McDonald's in the background, it's not convincing. and again, no shade on this woman. We're all trying to do things to be loved. We're trying to do things to fit in society. So again, no shade on her. You know, I'm just using this as a photograph to, you know, explore these concepts of society, like I said. So example is extreme, but I also think the recent fashion trend of emulating quiet luxury by the middle class is also bizarre, even if it doesn't look as extreme as Greenfield's image. So to conclude, actually kind of a long conclusion, but personally, I think that we want to present ourselves well to a world and show that we care and respect the social situation that we're entering. So nothing wrong with that. But there's a fine line to this. So I think it's disturbing that people feel like they need to pretend to be from a different social class than the one that they are currently belong to or have been to in the past, although we kind of always are have kind of ties to the social class that we came from, or to have belonged to in the past. So there's nothing shameful about not being a billionaire, you know? So I would say, you know, maybe people don't need to convince others that your habitus was developed being raised by billionaires, you know, like, and so not faking your habitus, I think it means self-acceptance of where you came from and being okay with who you are. And you can be classy and respected at any income level. You don't need to fake a habitus. MS thesis statement number 3. You don't need to fake a habitus. So like I said, you know, this isn't to shame anyone. You know, I don't really think it's interesting talking about things that are kind of black and white, and you know, I don't want to put anyone down or that kind of thing. I only want to look at people to kind of reflect myself and reflect others in society. So this is more a commentary on the greater society, and all of us as individuals that make up the people, you know, who feel compelled to level up or, you know, pretend they have a Louis Vuitton bag, you know, even if they don't have a home. I mean, this is really bizarre. I mean, I feel like it doesn't really seem bizarre. I mean, this does seem kind of normal to me, but I think that we need to defamiliarize the familiar because it's pretty bizarre. So yeah, and I also, you know, I just want to say, you know, look, you know, I'm into fashion and you know, that kind of thing as well. So I'm totally not immune to this. I'm, maybe you could say, part of the problem. And you know, the average American has 144 garments. You know, I'm a really bad estimator, but I probably have more. I'm probably bringing up the, you know, it's probably some guy who has like, who's like really practical and has like 3 pairs of pants, you know, that is, you know, making this average. And yeah, so I'm not saying these things to be self-righteous and, you know, holier than thou. You know, I just want to explore complex things that I'm complicit in, but realize that it's also a problem. And I think it's interesting, this kind of tension between kind of what we gravitate towards and what we know to be problematic, or maybe we don't know it's problematic, but we look closer and then we see that it's problematic. So I think it's complex. So I think complex things are more interesting than an easy takedown, and, you know, of self-evident villains. So yeah, so fashion is communication, and it's important to consider what it's communicating and why. So, you know, something might just, you know, seem like a bag, but it's actually entrenching structural inequalities. So yeah, so just to be aware of that, and nothing wrong with having a nice bag. I have a couple really nice bags. Like I said, I'm very into fashion. So, even if we research these things, we're not outside, kind of looking down on the universe. We're all embodied, kind of living in it, but we can try to still be critical. So anyway, if you found this interesting, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to ask yourself before you buy something if you're doing it to feel like you have fake power based on aesthetics, or if it's your really style and you just have to have it. So anyway, thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.